بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين. We started Hadith 40 or 40 Hadith in the last session, and it was about the verses of Surat Tawhid and end of Surat Tawhid and beginning of Surat Al-Hadid, and that Allah knew that there would be aqwamun muta'ammiqun fi akhir al-zaman, so then he sent these verses. فَمَنْ رَامَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ, if someone then goes and looks for something beyond that, halaka, then he is destroyed. We talked about the hadith, about the terms which are there, and then we had a chapter about tafsir of Surah Tawhid, that how difficult it is to do tafsir of this surah. And you remember that Mullah Sadra said that you need a volume, or maybe not just a volume, about every part of this. He said اگر زمان مهلت دهد و دهر مساعدت کند, if time permits and the world helps, a godly Arif or godly Hakim who has taken his knowledge from the Prophet and has taken his hikmah from Ahlul Bayt, for each can write a volume, a large volume, بلکه مجلدات کثیره, or even we can say not just volume, several volumes, about just 6 verses of Surat Al-Hadid. He says this. But Imam Khomeini said, we will try, because if we are not able to do something completely, we should do it as much as possible when it is something that doing part of it is also useful. I explained for you last session that sometimes doing part of something is not useful because you have to bring all of it. But sometimes it's useful as much as you can if you bring it, like this case. Or like, you are not able to feed all hungry people, feed as much as you can. So he has here a very brief discussion about Surat Qul Huwallah and then Surat Hadid. Very brief, but full of references to technical terms in Irfan. And I will try to simplify and just mention the major points. First, about Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He says, according to people who are involved in Irfan, he's called them Ahl Ma'rifat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim belongs to the same chapter which is starting with this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Because Bismillah, as you know, Ba is harf jar, Ism is majroor. Jar and majroor need to belong to something. So they are muta'alliq, and there must be something that is muta'allaq. Sometimes it can be a verb, sometimes it can be ism fa'il, ism maf'ul, sifat mushabbah, different things. So what is this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim belonging to? Some people have said it belongs to Asta'inu, which is not mentioned. Means Asta'inu Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I ask help from name of God. Like Asta'inu bis-sabr was-salah. Asta'inu Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. But Imam Khomeini says, according to Ahl Ma'rifat, we don't think it belongs to Asta'inu. It's something that relates to the same surah. Therefore, in every surah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim belongs to different things. Those who say Asta'inu, it can be for all the chapters which start, 113 chapters start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All of them can mean the same. Asta'inu, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Or Abda'u, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I start with this. But according to Ahl Ma'rifat, it is different. For every surah is unique. He says, بحسب هر سوره از سور قرآن شریف که متعلق بسم الله در لفظ و مظهر آن در معناست. So that surah, the terms are متعلق linguistically, and then its meaning is manifested in this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. معنای بسم الله مختلف شود. Therefore, the meaning of Bismillah varies from surah to surah. And he says also, whenever we start any action with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, again the meaning becomes different. So if I say, I start my speech with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, or I say I start eating Bismillah ar-Rahman, or I break my fast with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with Bismillah I'm doing these things. Again, Bismillah has different meanings in all these cases. Then he says, عارف بمظاهر و ظهورات اسماء الهیه. If someone is an arif who knows manifestations of divine names, this arif can have shuhud, can witness, can intuitively understand that all the actions and all the beings, they all exist because of Allah's greatest name, which is here he refers to Allah, Bismillah. Therefore, whenever you want to do something, you must remember the name of Allah and let this reach your heart. Let this go everywhere in your soul and mind and body. Bismillah, and then you can start. Bismillah akul, Bismillah ashrab, Bismillah aktub. In the name of God, I eat, I drink, I write, I do something. But it means that, in my explanation, it means that you must act as someone who is mindful of God and wants to make this action a manifestation of God, a manifestation of the name of God. Then, in kitaba, a good kitaba, a good writing, should exhibit something from God, which a speech may not exactly exhibit the same. Part of it's the same. For example, it should show knowledge to the, but writing is different from talking, or drinking, sleeping, going, visiting. So every action in its own way should reflect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, the wayfarer towards Allah and Arif billah, Salika ilallah, the one who is traveling towards God, and Arif billah, the one who has achieved ma'rifah of Allah, because Salik after some time is also Arif. So they have two outlooks, two ways of looking. Sometimes they have this outlook that they see all actions and all beings a kind of manifestation for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore for them Allah is so important and so embracing that for them sometimes all Bismillah become like this, the same. Bismillah در جمیع الصور و در جمیع افعال و اعمال به یک معنا. So they are so focused on God and they only see they have to give one response to God, and this is a summary of everything they do, for example like ubudiyyat, whatever. Therefore for them Bismillah has one meaning. But sometimes they have another outlook. They go into details, they go to distinctions and differences, and therefore if they want to be very analytic and very detailed, then they would say Bismillah of every surah has different meaning. He says in Surat Tawhid that we are discussing now, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. He says in this surah we can say Bismillah belongs to Qul. Qul huwallahu ahad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Qul. Means this saying of you should be in the name of God. Then this Bismillah, if it is taken in an abstract way, refers to Allah's absolute will, and if it is taken in a multiple and divide and detailed way, it refers to all the multiplicities that we have. And then he mentions about Huwa. Qul huwallahu ahad. Huwa, in Arabic grammar they tell us Huwa is Zamir Sha'an. Huwa is Zamir, or at least one possibility is this. Means this is the case that Allah Ahad. But there is also another interpretation to say that Huwa also refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huwa, Allah. And Huwa is God, Huwa is one, etc. Here Imam Khomeini tries to take Huwa as a reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is referring to him in a very special way. I don't know if you are familiar with, for example, some mystical literature, some Sufis, some Darwish, some Arifs. Everyone, of course, with their own specialities, and they are not always the same. But when they say Huwa, they mean something which is very, very close to the essence of God, as if you don't want to be referring to any sifa, any quality or any action, just you want to refer to that essence. They say Huwa. So this pronoun is not referring to necessarily to a noun which was mentioned before or name which was mentioned before. This refers to the essence of God. He says, in kalame sharife, this noble word of huwa, اشاره به مقام هویت مطلقه است من حیث هیه بدون آنکه متعین به تعین صفاتی یا متجلی به تجلیات اسمائی باشد، حتی اسماء ذاتیه. So we are just talking about God, not his qualities, even qualities of essence, like knowledge in his essence. No, just his absolute essence. And he says this reference, using huwa in this sense, is not possible except for someone who has a heart and has, a living heart. In Quran, sometimes says, لمن كان له قلب أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. Some people, they have heart, some people, they don't have heart, in the sense that their heart is not functioning or is sometimes dead. And then he says, in its true sense, the Prophet can say this. The heart of the Prophet can say huwa and refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other people, they cannot directly refer to Allah. They would refer to his actions or maximum to his qualities. And then he says something very moving. He says, اگر مأمور نبود به این که نسبت حق را ظاهر کند، متفوه به این کلمه شریفه ازلاً و ابداً نمی شد. Had it not been that Rasulullah was asked to say this and declare this, Rasulullah would never ever use the term huwa. But this is what Allah has decided, that he should say huwa. You are, I'm sure, familiar that, for example, in the Jewish tradition, they were not mentioning their main name that they had for God. And it was very holy, very sacred, and they were not supposed to mention it. For us, we are very happy to mention names of Allah because Allah has permitted us to mention his name, to call him by his name. But we should not forget adab and etiquette of mentioning name of God. Unfortunately, we mention name of God with heedlessness, with underestimating na'udhu billah, his rububiyyah. We say Allah, as I say, mention name of my friend. But an arif, when he mentions or hears name of God, they are very much overwhelmed. إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. Mentioning name of God is not like anything else. Maybe once I told you in some lectures, I remember in one trip to Medina, on the roof of Masjid. I normally don't go to the roof, but that trip I went to the roof of Masjid al-Nabi. And I saw a person, maybe I think, if I'm correct, I think was from Turkey, was listening to something. He had some headphone, but I could hear that every maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds, 1 minute, he was so overwhelmed, as you connect electricity to someone, like a shock. And I could understand that he's listening to a zikr or something, and when the name of God is mentioned, he was so, much moved. It was very powerful. And this happens if you tune yourself for some time to think about Allah with attention, then zikr has this power. And Quran says, إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجَلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. So this is about names of God in general. But for Urafa, Huwa is so important that Imam Khomeini says, if Allah had not asked Rasulullah to say Huwa, he would never say Huwa. Because for them, Huwa is very close to God. There is no Alim, Rahman. These are very important. Rahman, Rahim, all these, or even Allah. Huwa. Because Huwa itself doesn't have any meaning. Huwa is just referring, is a pronoun. For people who are not Arif, they think Huwa is not that much important. He, we don't understand from he anything. If you say, for example, Rahman, Rahim, at least we understand something. But he, who is he? Yes, for someone who doesn't know Allah, yes, he doesn't convey that much meaning. But for someone who knows Allah, he is the nearest thing to him, because he has the least of linguistic meaning. Doesn't refer to anything else, just refers to him. So he says, اگر مأمور نبود به این که نسبت حق را ظاهر کند، متفوه تفوه means to speak, تفوه. Had it not been that Rasulullah was ma'amur, was asked to izhar means to disclose, to declare, to express this relation with Allah, he would never say this. Azalan wa abada. Never ever he would say this. ولی در قضای الهی حتمی است که نبی ختمی صلی الله علیه و آله اظهار این اشاره فرماید. But this is in firm and decisive divine decree that the last prophet should say this. Then he refers to his teacher, Sheikh ma Arif Kamil. As you remember, we had this many times. He very much respects his teacher and praises him. And to say Arif Kamil is not a small thing, Arif is by itself great credit to give to someone, and then you say Arif Kamil. So Imam Khomeini says Arif Kamil Shah Abadi. By the way, there is a series of documentary on Ayatollah Shah Abadi, Hadith Sarf, and I don't know if English is available, but maybe it's available. Alhamdulillah, our brothers and sisters are working on the one on Allama Tabatabai. Inshallah, soon they are able to share with us. And inshallah, after that, then they can, inshallah, go on and talk about other scholars, other ulama Rabbani. But Alhamdulillah, the main documentary, the original one in Farsi, is available, and I think it's translated to Arabic and English. At least, I think Arabic must be there. Al-Awtad. So, عارف کامل شاه آبادی روحی فدا. May my soul be his ransom. I don't think you find this in any other tradition except in very, very spiritual traditions, that a student has such relation with his teacher that is happy to give his life. And I am sure that Imam Khomeini says Ruhi Feda, he means that. It's not that he just says something for the. First of all, this is not common to say this for your teacher. Second, Imam Khomeini was a person that was very careful about his words. I told you, I think in some lectures, that once during war he had written a statement, a letter for the people who were in the battlefield. We call them Razmandegan, for these soldiers in the battlefield, to be, then it was sent to be read by radio. Then he said, bring it back. And he changed something. They asked what happened. He said, I had written, I pray for you با تمام وجود, with my whole being, I pray for you. Then I thought, maybe this is exaggeration. I am not praying for them with all my being. So he removed با تمام وجود. So he was so careful about it. So he says روحی فدا. So he means that. So he says, our Sheikh, our master, our Alif Kamil, Shah Abadi, Ruhi Feda, می فرمود که هو برهان بر 6 اسم و کمال دیگری است که در سوره مبارکه توحید پس از این کلمه مبارکه ذکر شده است. As I said, someone who is not Arif says Huwa. We don't understand that much from Huwa. Allahu Samad, we understand something. Lam yalid, walam yulad, walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, we understand. But Huwa, just he. But he says, our teacher used to say that Huwa, just Huwa, is the proof for 6 other names and perfections which are mentioned in Surah Tawhid. Because ذات مقدس چون هوای مطلق است. The holy essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolute. And he says this refers to Sarf Wujud, is absolute being. An absolute being must have all the perfections. Because if he lacks anything, it means that you are modifying. It's no longer absolute. مستجمع جمیع کمالات اسمائی است، پس الله هست. So since Huwa is absolute, so it has all the perfections, and then this is Allah, because Allah is اسم جامع جمیع کمالات. So from Huwa we reached Allah. And then he says, because it is sarful wujud, therefore it has to be ahad, is one. Because sarful shay la yatathanna wa la yatakar. When you say something merely, for example, just whiteness. Whiteness cannot be two. You can say white paper, white book, white board, but just white cannot be two. Sarful wujud also la yatathanna wa la yatakar. So ahad also we understood it from huwa. And because it has no mahiyya, because mahiyya is for wujud muqayyad. Any wujud which is limited and confined has mahiyya. Mahiyya is hudud al-wujud. So Allah has no mahiyya, therefore He is samad. And because it's absolute and self, therefore it's not going to have any imperfection, any deficiency. Therefore is not going to be born out of something or produced by something or be repeated. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. And also there is nothing like Him because it's absolute. So walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. So He wanted to bring all these things from huwa, if we understand huwa as referring to His absolute essence. This is about Qul Huwa Allah. Then he has a brief description of the verses at the end of at the beginning of Surah Al-Hadid. Because we have verses in end of Surah Al-Hash which are also very important. This is why I said end. But here we are talking about Surah Al-Hadid, beginning of Surah Al-Hadid. I think we leave it inshallah for the next session. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.